Emily and Elizabeth, identical twin sisters, were born to a loving mother, Mrs. Acua. They grew up in a small town in Nigeria, where they were inseparable. They did everything together, from going to school to playing sports. As they grew older, Emily and Elizabeth began to realize that they were different from other girls. They felt a deep emotional connection with each other, and they began to develop romantic feelings. At first, they were confused and scared. They didn't know what to make of their feelings, and they were afraid of being rejected by their mother and society. But as they grew older, they realized that their love for each other was real, and they couldn't deny it. They began to secretly date, always looking over their shoulders, afraid of being caught. Their mother, Mrs. Acua, was a successful businesswoman who owned a big store where she sold dried fish in large quantities. She was known for her kindness and generosity. But she was also strict and traditional. Emily and Elizabeth were afraid of telling their mother about their relationship. They knew that she would be shocked and disappointed, and they didn't want to lose her love and support, so they kept their relationship a secret, always sneaking around and lying to their mother about where they were going and who they were with. But one day, their mother caught them kissing in their room. She was shocked and heartbroken, and she didn't know what to do. She confronted Emily and Elizabeth, who confessed to being in a romantic relationship. Their mother was torn between her love for her daughters and her disapproval of their relationship. She tried to convince them to end their relationship, but Emily and Elizabeth refused. They told their mother that they loved each other, and they couldn't deny their feelings. Their mother was devastated. She didn't know what to do, and she felt like she was losing her daughters. She invited so many powerful pastors and prayer warriors. They prayed, fasted, and advised the twin sisters, but nothing worked. As the days went by, the tension between Emily, Elizabeth, and their mother grew thicker. Emily and Elizabeth felt like they were being rejected by their mother, and they began to distance themselves from her. Their mother was heartbroken. She felt like she was losing her daughters, and she didn't know how to get them back. One day, Emily and Elizabeth decided to leave home and start a new life together. They packed their bags and said goodbye to their mother, who was devastated. As they walked away from their home, Emily and Elizabeth felt a mix of emotions. They were excited to start their new life together, but they were also sad to be leaving their mother behind. They knew that they would never be able to go back home, and they were determined to make a new life for themselves. As they settled into their new home, Emily and Elizabeth began to build a new life together. They made new friends, and began to live their lives openly and honestly. Their mother, Mrs. Acua, was heartbroken. She missed her daughters terribly, and she wished that she could turn back the clock and accept them for who they were, but it was an abomination. After Emily and Elizabeth left their mother's house, they began making plans for their future together. They started preparing for their wedding, excited to spend the rest of their lives with each other. However, their mother, Mrs. Acua, was devastated when she heard the news. She couldn't understand why her daughters would engage in such a taboo relationship. Desperate for answers, Mrs. Acua sought the guidance of several prophets and pastors. One prophet, renowned for his wisdom and insight, revealed a shocking truth. "Woman, you were desperate for a child, and your desperation led you to seek help from a wicked sorcerer. She granted your wish, but at a terrible cost. Your daughters were born with a curse, one that has manipulated their feelings and actions." The prophet's words left Mrs. Acua stunned and heartbroken. "What can I do to break this curse?" she begged. The prophet's response was firm. "You must bring 7 cows and 7 white chickens as a sacrifice. Only then can the curse be lifted, and your daughters restored to their rightful minds." Mrs. Acua was torn between her love for her daughters and her fear of the unknown. But she knew she had to act. She purchased the required animals and presented them to the prophet. The ritual was performed, and as the prophet prayed, Emily and Elizabeth suddenly regained their senses. They looked at each other in confusion, and for the first time, they saw themselves as sisters, not lovers. The realization was both shocking and liberating. They understood that their feelings for each other were a result of the curse, and that they could never truly be together. With heavy hearts, they made the difficult decision to part ways, vowing to remain close as sisters, but never to engage in a romantic relationship again. As Emily and Elizabeth began their new lives apart from each other, they struggled to come to terms with their past. They had to relearn how to interact with each other as sisters, rather than romantic partners. It was a difficult and painful process, but they were determined to move forward. Mrs. Acua, who had been filled with regret and guilt over her role in her daughter's curse, was relieved to see them healing. She did her best to support them, cooking their favorite meals and listening to their stories. One day, as they sat down to a meal of fufu and light soup, Emily turned to Elizabeth and said, "You know, I've been thinking. We were so blinded by our feelings for each other that we never stopped to think about what was right or wrong." Elizabeth nodded in agreement. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. But I've come to realize that our love for each other wasn't wrong. It was just misplaced." Emily smiled. "Exactly. And I'm grateful that we can still love and support each other, even if it's not in a romantic way." As they finished their meal and began to clear the table, Mrs. Acua looked on with pride. She knew that her daughter still had a long way to go, but she was grateful to see them healing and growing. As they washed the dishes together, Emily turned to Elizabeth and said, "You know, I've been thinking. Maybe our story can serve as a lesson to others. Maybe it can help people understand that love comes in many forms, and that it's never too late to seek help and guidance." Elizabeth smiled. "I like that idea. And who knows? Maybe our story can even help others avoid the mistakes we made." As they finished washing the dishes and began to dry them, Mrs. Acua looked on with a sense of hope. She knew that her daughter's story was one of redemption and healing, and she was grateful to see them using their experiences to help others. The three of them sat down to a quiet evening together, watching the stars twinkle to life outside their window. As they sat there, Emily turned to Elizabeth and said, "You know, I'm grateful for our journey. It's been difficult, but it's taught us so much about love, family, and redemption." Elizabeth smiled. "Me too, sister. Me too." And as they sat there together, surrounded by the quiet peace of the evening, they knew that they would always be there for each other, no matter what. Moral lessons. 1. Love knows no boundaries, but it must be guided by wisdom and morality. Emily and Elizabeth's love for each other was genuine, but it was misplaced. Their story teaches us that love must be guided by wisdom and morality. 2. Desperation can lead to devastating consequences. Mrs. Acua's desperation for a child led her to seek help from a wicked sorcerer, resulting in a curse that almost destroyed her daughter's lives. 3. Seeking help and guidance is a sign of strength, not weakness. Mrs. Acua's decision to seek help from prophets and pastors ultimately led to the lifting of the curse and the restoration of her daughter's relationship. 4. Redemption and healing are possible. Emily and Elizabeth's story shows that no matter how dark or difficult our circumstances may be, redemption and healing are always possible. Food for thought. 1. What are the consequences of our desperation? How far are we willing to go to get what we want, and what are the potential consequences of our actions? 2. How do we define love and relationships? What are the boundaries and guidelines that govern our relationships, and how do we determine what is healthy and what is not? 3. What role does seeking help and guidance play in our lives? How often do we seek help and guidance, and what are the benefits of doing so?
Thanks for watching. Please like for more stories and leave your thoughts in the comment section. Do not forget to share this story with your friends, your family, in fact, all your loved ones. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye.